It's time now to turn our attention to snooker and reflect on the very sad news that the much-loved John Virgo has sadly passed away at the age of 79. Virgo won the UK Championship back in 1979 during his 18-year playing career, and then, of course, became a legendary commentator and also presented the very popular snooker show Big Break for 11 years. Joining us now to talk about the legend that is John Virgo is another snooker legend. As we say hello and good afternoon to the 1997 champion of the world, Ken Doherty. Hello, Ken. How are you?
Hi, Andy. Okay, yeah. Just devastated, mate. Devastated. He's such a great character, John. I think all the snooker fans and anybody who's worked with him will miss him dearly today, and I'm still in shock, to be honest.
I'm sure you are. Ken, listen, when we were talking about this morning about who we should get on, I really wanted someone on our show that not just knew him well, because I sort of feel that the snooker circuit is quite tight anyway. Everyone knows everyone.
Yeah.
But someone that worked with him day in, day out. Now, of course, you're one of the top commentators at the Beeb. You would have sat alongside John for many a snooker match. So I thought you were up there with the best of them to get on today's show. So I'm so glad you've come on. Just, if you can, just explain to people what he was like, not just as a commentator, but also as a player. A lot of people, of course, that have grown up with snooker probably didn't even realise he was a top snooker player back in the day.
Yeah, he was. Well, of course, he won the UK Championship in 1979. He'd been to the semi-final of the World Championship as well. And yeah, he was a top snooker player back in the the 70s and sort of early 80s, and he retired just when I was sort of coming into the game, But I never saw him play that much, only sort of at exhibitions and stuff like that. But saw some old footage, but never saw him play live. But he was just for me, like when I came in to start doing the stuff on the BBC, the commentary and that, he just sort of took me under his wing, himself and Dennis Taylor. Just the way, his natural sort of way and his ability to be able to draw the listener in, and I think, growing up listening to him and working with him, he could tell a story, he could describe it in his own sort of innate way that was different to other commentators, and it was just he was just wonderful to work with. He was a great character. He loved his football, he loved his horse racing, he loved his golf, and he loved having a bet, and he loved having a drink and a little sing-song and, just telling stories, and regale stories. And he was one of those characters, Andy, and you knew him yourself, that you'd sort of be hanging on his every word because, he'd have stories about Jim Davidson, he'd have stories about the Panto, he'd have stories about Big Break, about meeting different characters and different actors. Victor Spinetti was a guy he was on Panto with, and Jim Davidson for many, many years. And Rocky Taylor, his best friend, was a stuntman, on loads of movies, and they were best pals. And he just had some wonderful, wonderful stories. And
Ken,
I will miss him dearly.
When did you last speak to him? Because I'm led to believe it was quite unexpected.
I was last with him at the Masters. Of course, I commentated with him at the Masters, and he only rang me just the other day, and I missed it. I was with Dennis at the time, and I was working, and I missed his phone call, and was going to ring him back actually today, but I just got the news this morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. His best friend over in Spain, James, and the first words out of my mouth was, when you get a phone call at 7:15 in the morning, the first words were, "Don't tell me any bad news, James." And he says, "Yeah," he says, "he's gone," and I just couldn't believe it, Yeah,
it's so sad. It is. You spent so much time with him in the commentary box, in front of the camera, but also sort of behind the scenes. I was lucky enough, as you quite rightly said, I knew him nowhere near as well as you knew him, but I spent a lot of time with him, and in the early days when I was doing Eurosport snooker, we'd go away for a week to Northern Ireland, we'd go away for a week to Wales, and if we were doing Cardiff, the BBC were there, so he would be there as well. So lucky enough to spend a few nights with him in the bar, having a drink and having a good old chat with him. Are there any particular moments when you look back, Ken, that you remember fondly? Was there like a great night you went out with him and a few others? Or
actually, listen, I've so many, in Ireland, and he used to. Even up in Sheffield, we used to, go out for dinner, and sometimes we'd come back to the bar and he'd get a sing song. And one of his favourite songs, I mean, he loved music, and he loved singing. And one of his favourite songs was actually "The Greenfields of Fans" by the Furies, which was an Irish, an Irish band, but it was one of his favourite songs. But he could sing anything, I think one of my favourite times when he was in the commentary was quite a funny time when he didn't actually realise the red button was on, because he was in with Willie Thorne, and it was the 40-year anniversary of the World Championships. They had the longest frame in the 40 years. It was a semi-final match on a Saturday morning, first session between Mark Selby and Mark O'Fu. And a couple of frames later, they had the second longest frame in the history of the Crucible in the 40 years. And Willie had put down the microphone. He forgot to switch off the red button. And he turned to John Virgo, and John didn't see the red button was still on, which is where it gets really funny, because Willie had turned to John. He says, I was really looking forward to this match, but it's absolute crap, And John, in his imitable voice, goes, I was hoping to watch a bit of racing this afternoon. Now it looks like I won't even see effing match of the day.
I remember that.
That was a classic, absolute classic.
Yeah. He was fantastic to listen to, right? One of the great commentators. And of course had the catchphrase, where's the cue ball going?
Where's the cue ball?
There's so much we're
going
to
nobody could say it like him. Nobody could say it like him.
How would you like for snooker to remember him? What do you think the next step should be?
I think, for me, he was like a godfather to me. Like a godfather to all, the BBC crew. He loved just commentating. He loved entertaining the crowd. There was always a little quip here and there. And what he said to me, and I'll never forget it, I was in the commentary box one time, and Ronnie O'Sullivan had cleared up. He made this magnificent clearance to keep the match alive, and he was standing on his chair, out of the chair, in the commentary box, shouting into the microphone, just to dramatise the effect of the last frame. And I stood there and I just started I stood there clapping at him, because it was just magnificent. And he turned to me, he says, well, Ken, he goes, it's theatre, it is theatre. And never forget that. And he was dead right, because that's what sport is all about, and he could dramatise it like no other. And he was just absolutely brilliant. And I think, the people loved him, the spectators who get the earpiece, they just loved his voice and loved listening to him, and the way he could create the drama and bring the listener in, just like no other. And himself and Dennis,
He found the funny in everything as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he loved the quip, he loved the joke, and he loved when the time allowed it. I mean, there was another time when a pigeon came into the Crucible, and it landed on the table, and then it flew up in front of our commentary box. And the first words out of his mouth were live on commentary, somebody catch the pigeon. Catch the pigeon. Oh, he's just fantastic. He was hilarious. He was, you'd never get tired of being in his company, and unfortunately, we won't have that chance anymore,
Okay, listen, it's always tough, certainly, when it's so fresh in our minds. Are you all right? Because I know he was a close friend of yours. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm just, I'm in shock. I don't know how we're sort of, we get sort of through it, and the funeral will be, very, very sad. But I'm sure all the snooker lads will be the same. We'll tell stories about him, and that's what he would have wanted, to celebrate his life, I think, and what he did for snooker, because without doubt he was the voice of snooker,
Listen, we're old mates, and I'm always about if ever you need a chat, and I really appreciate you coming on, Ken.
I appreciate it. No problem. Thanks, mate.
Take care, pal.
Take care.
I'll see you soon.
Take care, pal. Bye-bye.
There you go. It's never easy, is it? Certainly when you know someone so well as Ken Doherty obviously did. That was Ken Doherty paying homage to one of the greats, certainly one of the best commentators we've ever seen over there. That was Ken talking about John Virgo, who sadly passed away, age 79.